Okay, so well, let's get started. First of all, I'm going to ask you to have a think about these three people, and I'm going to ask you to listen to three styles of feedback, and for you to decide which you think your style of feedback currently approximates to it. Right. So, poll. Here we go. First one. Which of these sounds the most like you? You've really got to get your numbers straight before you walk in the door. We looked really stupid. Or B, the bit with the pricing could have gone better. Look, perhaps I should do the numbers next time. Or C, I was worried when you got those calculations wrong in front of the client. Well, I suppose they may have thought that we didn't know our stuff. So which sounds the most like you? A, B or C? You've really got to get your numbers straight. The bit with the pricing could have gone better. Or I was worried when you got the calculations wrong. Okay, so C, let's reveal how you have voted. Here we go. 12% of you said you've got to get your numbers straight. A bit on pricing could have gone better. That gets obviously the top vote there, and closely followed though by I was worried when you got the calculations wrong. So I want to say maybe just hold that thought for now, and then now construct yourself a piece of feedback for that first person. Now, you remember I said bring to mind three people who you want to give feedback to, or to whom you owe feedback. Now, this is the chance to use one of those and have a think about how you would construct the feedback to them at the moment. And when you have, write it in to your to the questions pane on the right hand side of your screen. So I'm going to give you a couple of minutes because it might take you a moment to tune into this whole feedback malarkey. So have a think about how would it read now, or how would it sound now. So type that out now, and I'll give you a little bit of time to think. Okay, so we've got some responses here. Let me read a few of them out. So we've got, here we go. Now, interesting, I've got one here from Kate, and I don't know. Okay, let's assume that this is Kate giving me feedback on my feedback. Your feedback was direct, but not clear enough for the other person to be able to change their behaviour, because you did not get the underlying cause as to why the numbers were wrong. So that's a double exercise going there. Okay, fine. So Kate, that's how Kate would give the feedback. So who else have we got? We've got here we go. So Sean recommends, at the moment I don't feel we are working well together. I feel that we are not communicating clearly. Okay, so I'm going to take that's a particularly interesting one. So what's happening there, Sean, is I'm worried that you're mistaking using the word feel for actually using a feeling. So that would be my feedback to that one. If I was listening to your feedback, I would be puzzled about just what you were feeling. Okay, let's see. Kevin's piece of feedback is Kevin W says, is there anything more we could have done for the customer during your visit? Oh, a question. Okay, so yeah, Kevin, how would I react to that? That would get me thinking. I would be small suspicious, like 3 out of 10, 4 out of 10 suspicious of you that you had an agenda. So I might, suspicious I might be if I didn't know you so well. Okay. Gary is suggesting he's got a different kind of situation. There were errors in the core data. It made us all look foolish. Next time, both of us need to confirm the numbers before issuing. Okay, so Gary, yours sounds very technical, very precise, very factual, which I'd leave that thinking or being absolutely clear. So comfortable that I got the message of what you wanted. I'd feel unsure about whether I'd annoyed you or not. I'm going to pick out one more bit. So this is Linda W. This is how she would have given, she's going to give a piece of feedback, or has in mind to give it to one of her targets. I was a bit embarrassed by your behaviour in last week's meeting. If I was the recipient of this, Linda, I would feel embarrassed now. So as Paul, rather than a recipient, I'm thinking, wow, that's the way to go. I like Linda's version so far, the best so far, because she's the one who has actually named the feeling, and it's a very short piece. So thank you for all of you who've had a crack at that. We'll come back and do a couple more run-throughs with your different targets. Now let me now go on to the main bit of our material. What is this? What is feedback really about? Well, it has to start with an initial decision to actually say something. Now, I think there is something important to be done here in the few moments before we decide to give feedback. And for me, it's about hiding myself, at least in my head, in a quiet place to consider a few things about the if and how to give the feedback. The first thing I really think I need to think about is why. Why am I doing this? Is it really worth it? Is it just because I'm annoyed? Or is it because there is actually a benefit for somebody? That it's actually going to help them? Because if I'm just going to get angry and they can't learn anything from it, even if I give well-structured, detailed, brief feedback, etc., and I'm going to come on to those bits in a second, if I'm giving it in the wrong way or for the wrong reasons, the wrong motivations, that's probably a reason for me to keep my mouth shut. And what about effect? Now, this is really important, and you'll see why in a second. What effect am I trying to have? In other words, and more specifically, how do I want the recipient of my feedback to feel? Because I need them to feel something positive if I have a positive piece of feedback for them, or something negative if I have a negative piece of feedback. Leaving people unmoved, unruffled, either for positive or negative reasons, is a waste of time. So trying to give feedback without upsetting somebody is a zero-sum game. And lastly, I need to decide how much of the truth am I prepared to give. Now, I might judge that giving them everything, because it's built up over a period of time, might be a rather bad idea, both for me and for them. So maybe if this feedback is long overdue, I need to decide, okay, I'm just going to focus on part of the truth, which is enough for now to let them know something about how I'm feeling. So this sounds laborious, but in truth, when you're thinking about this, this is a minute's pause before actually saying something, and it's well worth it. So that's about the initial decision about whether to give feedback. Okay, so let's assume now that you have actually decided to say something to the person. Now, okay, so you've decided to give the person the feedback. Now, because it's something that I'm suggesting you do a lot and often, it has to be a very simple piece of preparation. So, if you keep it simple, the chances are that you'll practice it more often. So this is a routine that you need to get into doing. Now, for example, it has to it needn't have a huge introduction, because if I'm trying to compose a beautifully fashioned intro, then I'm probably going to fail. I'm going to think, no, that doesn't sound right. I need to do this. Oh, no, that doesn't quite hit the right note. So introductions shouldn't be part of your preparation. Neither should trying to fluff it up, because people really, when we are trying to put a nice cotton wool ball around feedback, particularly if it's very tough feedback, people will know. They will sense that you and I are avoiding the issue, and they're just waiting there, becoming more and more nervous as you become more and more nervous. So trying to fluff things up doesn't work. And the other thing that you don't need, lastly, is that you don't need a big, giant justifications. Lots of reasons concocted to justify why you're giving that person feedback. You actually don't need to build any reason around it other than the fact that you have a really good feeling about it or that you have a bad feeling. And that's it. Your feeling is enough. And this, I recognise, may fly in the face of what many of you consider to be professional behaviour, because you and I have been educated to imagine that we make logical decisions at work and we leave all the feeling stuff for home. I happen to believe that's nonsense, because we are human beings running businesses. And actually, our feelings form by far the most delicate and precise way of judging whether we're making a good decision or a bad one. And to not talk about our feelings is to leave out the most important piece of decision making, and in fact the most important element that gets people to want to change. So I want to kind of ban the because. I'm saying this to you because it's going to be good for your career, or I'm saying this to you because I want you to grow. I'm saying this because blah blah blah. You don't need that. Okay, now I want to show you how I actually structure feedback. And it actually came out in one of the examples, which unfortunately I've now rubbed off the board. But the lady who used the feeling. Okay, so here it is. So I just put 3 bits of information in, and in fact it's only really the first 2 that are super important. How I feel and what about. If I can concoct the why, so much the better. So let me give you a couple of examples. Here we go. So Nicola, so I can give some feedback to Nicola. Nicola, I'm always really impressed when you come in early on a webinar morning. No, I'm relieved when you come in early on a webinar morning, because I know that everything is going to go right. Nicola, I was, and this is not really feedback for Nicola. I was going to say I was worried when I heard her voice saying no sound, but that's not feedback for her. I don't have any negative feedback for Nicola, but let's say I'm going to pretend. Nicola, I'm pretending it. So Nicola, I was worried yesterday when you told me that I had. I was annoyed when you told me I had 2 meetings this afternoon after lunch, when I thought that on a webinar day we tend not to put in too much into the diary. So as you can see, just those 3 little pieces of information going in. Okay, so what I'm going to ask you to do now, this is the second practical phase. I'm going to actually leave this up, and I'm going to give you a minute or 2 to think about your second piece of feedback, and maybe consider structuring it like that piece there, and see how you get on. So yeah, I'm going to give you a minute to reconfigure your feedback for your second example person. Okay, I'm going to start reading out some examples. They're coming in thick and fast now. So, right, and just click on the first one. This is from Stephanie W. Thank you. I'm really grateful for that. I like that, Stephanie, because it's got the feeling Hilary L. I was concerned when you said you didn't find the training useful, as I believe this is an area where you could benefit from further development. I like the how much meaning you put into that, Hilary. Concerned is a word that really turns me off, because I'm wondering what the person really means. Are they really concerned? Do we ever get really concerned, or do we get disappointed and worried and irritated? So, interesting word, concerned. Amanda Z, I feel frustrated when I receive inaccurate data from you. It means extra time for me to check your work, and I know you're more than... Okay, I love that. I feel frustrated when you receive inaccurate data from you. Full stop. It means extra time from me to check your work. And I wish you'd stop there, because then Amanda tries to be terribly nice and give some encouragement to her target, and for me, that just didn't work for me. I'm sort of assuming that you think I'm good enough. Linda W, I was really impressed by you stepping up to lead in the technical discussion yesterday. Well done. So Linda, I love that. Interestingly, the only bit that I don't like is the well done, because you've already done that. I'm going to come on to something in a second, in several minutes, about the well dones and the other stuff. Okay, I'm going to just skip through. There's loads of examples here. I'm not going to read them all out. I was disappointed. This is Charlotte M. I was disappointed when you didn't take more control of the meeting yesterday. I love that. Really like it because it's brief and it's got a truthful feeling. Kate J, I felt ignored when you asked for opinions, and then said, it's just a word, because you didn't try and understand why I saw it. Okay, I like that, Kate, because it's really specific. Gary, last couple, Gary, I was frustrated we sent that appraisal out wrong. It made us look incompetent. I like that one, Gary. It's very precise, it's brief, and it has a feeling in it. And last, I'm going to skip down. Here we go. Sue K. I was worried when I saw your email to S. I thought she might find it rather over direct. I like that very much too. And it's amazing, isn't it, when we put our minds to it, how easy it is. Well, I don't know, easy, but how it is possible to fit a lot of meaning into a few words when we allow ourselves to lead with the feeling. So great. Lots of other fantastic examples. So thank you so much for posting those. Oh, actually, I can't resist this one. This is from Victoria P. I feel uncomfortable when you seem to get upset if I ask you a question that you cannot answer. That's I like that. Yes. Interesting. I'm glad I read this one. I couldn't see the whole thing, but I'm glad I read it. And I'll say why. Because there's a big because in there, Victoria. And then I start to get lost in the words. So I love the first bit. I feel uncomfortable when you seem to get upset if I ask you a question you can't answer. I'll come back to that. It raises your various examples of feedback raise a lot of questions, and I do want to come back to. So I'm going to leave those examples for now. Thank you so much for posting those. There's some of you might have wondered why feelings, and I have kind of explained, but I would just want to spend a couple more minutes on why feelings, because I think it's really important. Well, there's a couple of reasons, really. The first thing is that they are the truth, and it's the one thing that we know that we can talk about, which is fact. Now, people don't often equate feelings with facts, but that is exactly what they are. They are our reality. It also happens that they are incredibly powerful. So they're very powerful. Why are they powerful? Because they are the truth. That's slightly circular, but it's the biggest and most personal truth we can say about ourselves. The other reason they're powerful is that people can see by our faces and by our body language that the words that are coming out of our mouths match the picture that they see. And because of that, they believe us. When we hold back on the truth by pretending to feel one way, but then saying something else, incidentally, as many of adults do when they're talking to children or shareholders, same thing, that we hold back and we are non-believable. And that's why, because the words don't match the pictures. So those are the reasons I think it's absolutely essential to get used to using the F word, because it is the most powerful way of conveying meaning between human beings. Okay, so on with the show. A lot of people stop themselves from giving feedback because they don't. Well, there are lots of different reasons, but we get really nervous. And so what I want to do now is just to spend a few minutes talking about nerves and how to get around them. But firstly, what do we get nervous about? What puts us off? Well, sometimes it's just a question of finding the right moment. Now, there's a thing about the right moment, and you probably know what I'm going to say. The right moment doesn't exist. There is no such thing. We have to make the moment. One thing I would ask you to avoid is to not make the moment tacked on to the end of a different conversation, which is totally unrelated. Because what it'll do is then make your feedback into an "oh, by the way." And if it's something big and your feedback hits its mark, it's a really rather sneaky, unpleasant way of delivering a very, very big message. So try not to do that. Create the occasion. The second thing is that we never know how to start. Do we compliment them on the tie, the weather? How do we start? The thought here is very simple. You just start with the feedback. I wanted to say something to you about yesterday, and so on. Or I wanted to mention something, or I just say, I want you to know just now I started feeling, and then we get on with it. The other thing that tends to put people off is the size of the impending reaction. Until we get used to giving feedback, and there will be some people who are taking part in this webinar today who do this like falling off a log. But the more you do it, the more you realise that many of your fears are totally unfounded. People don't react badly to truthful feedback. Remember, because we're talking about our feelings, we've also made ourselves a bit vulnerable, and people like that. It's when we point the finger in a surgical fashion and rip them apart by going down a bullet point list of their failings, that's when they react badly. But when we tell them the truth from the heart, then that's very believable for them. So those big reactions very seldom come true. So I want to now turn quickly to some turn-offs. Now, these are things that I think often spoil people's feedback, and I mentioned a couple of them, or at least alluded to them a few minutes ago. I want to bring them alive now with my 5 most frequently encountered feedback turn-offs. Number 1. And this is this is a personal thing, and you'll have to decide whether it affects you in the same way. I don't like being lectured. I don't like people, what I would call patronising me and telling me their experiences. Now, sometimes it just so happens that your experience that I'm listening to is really, really interesting, and I want to hear it. But I don't want to hear it as part of the feedback that you're giving me about my performance. The second thing I don't want is for you to be a guru and expect me to take your advice, to go on your life experience, to go on what you think I should do. And a couple of the bits of feedback were actually had a little bit of the guru at the end. And that, for me, spoils it because, and I'll tell you, there's a very specific reason. I think we think of ourselves as we walk into work as highly intelligent individuals. So does everybody else. So I think that giving people some news and then being there for them while they're processing it is the most important thing that we can do. When we speak after we've given some feedback, we're just getting in the way. And even if that little speech that we make is meant to be encouraging, they will get the encouragement from the tone of the feedback in the first place. Any more is noise. The next thing is probably the thing that people find the most debilitating to be on the receiving end of, and that's anger. Anger is, most of us find, very, very tough to handle because it's so big, and actually it drills into all our fears about people and how they might be with us. So when if we give feedback in anger, it's extremely difficult for the other person, unless they've really got their wits about them, to pay any attention at all. So if you can, and this is really probably the most important thing of all, divide the angry moment, even if it's by 10 minutes, from the moment that you give feedback. Your feedback may be totally justified, but the chances are you're going to completely spoil it if you deliver it at the point where you're just not equipped, where you've gone over the edge. Take a walk, take a break, do something until you get your head back together again. Number 4 is that too many words thing. So some of the bits of feedback that went up as experiments did suffer somewhat from this too many words business. And even in this paragraph, this joke illustration I have here, there's some good feedback in there. But actually, there's just too much of it. People can't compute nearly as much as we think they can. So the more sparing you are, the more likely it is that whatever you have to say is really going to sink in. And finally, number 5, and this is probably the thing that messes up more feedback than any other thing, it gives feedback a bad reputation, and that is scarcity. There are a number of organizations out there that we've worked with, full of lovely people, but the way the organization encourages feedback as a system is for feedback to be stored, these big matrix places, feedback is stored for the annual or twice annual, biannual piece of feedback giving. And I think that's a disaster. What we need to do is to encourage our teams and ourselves to take a personal decision. I am going to make feedback a normal part of daily living. I'm not going to wait, because if I wait, I'm going to encounter all sorts of other problems of people forgetting, then they're going to ask for justification, they're not going to remember the occasion, and positive feedback is just useless if it's too long afterwards. So scarcity, it's a shame to leave it too long. Okay, so what happens if we get the big reaction? Okay, so here's I'm gonna zip through this because I really think this is important. We often do fear getting big reactions, and very occasionally we will get one. So how can we handle it? Well, most people think that they have to really be ready for anything. And so they will, really suit up for anger. They will get the box of tissues ready just in case somebody cries. And if, God forbid, if somebody should just come out blank, they think that they've got to work everything out. But actually, all of these reactions or preparations to react are not required. All we really need to do is to be prepared in the pause after the feedback is to listen. All we have to do is pay attention to the other person, even if it's just to notice how they sound or how they seem, and just say, you seem annoyed, you seem frustrated, you look worried, you sound worried. And that piece of magic, paying attention, is often enough to make people feel completely differently, because at that point they realise that you've paid attention to them, that you care about the impact of your feedback. And for me, it's that simple. Don't try and prepare for every eventuality. Just prepare to listen. And finally, just before we stop for questions, there's something about the unexpected, and that's another factor that puts people off giving feedback at all. So here's the unexpected is often when maybe, let's say somebody gets maybe they just frown, or maybe they say something we didn't anticipate, or maybe they bring up another occasion, or maybe they talk about someone completely different, and all of a sudden we find ourselves on the defensive. We didn't think that was going to happen, and we're not supposed to. We're just supposed to pay attention. But still inside you may be thinking, oh gosh, what do I say? What do I say? And actually, as a result, what often we do is to pretend that everything is all right. So we put on a professional, quote unquote, veneer. And actually, by far the most useful thing to do is to actually tell the truth, is to say how we're actually feeling. You've caught me by surprise there. Gosh, I'm worried to see you react like that. I'm shocked by your reaction. I'm puzzled. I don't know what to say. And often that's enough to humanize the conversation and to reset the button if you need to. But mainly, of course, you're resetting your own button. So telling the truth, saying how you feel, just as you did in the feedback itself, is the way out of that poleaxe moment where you don't know what to do or what to say. Okay, so there we have it. What have I got you thinking? We're going to have there's some time for some Q&A before we wrap up this morning. So yes, what are you thinking? I've got a couple of questions here standing by already, and yes. So here we go. So Kate says, hi Paul, unfortunately I have had two people in my life who react with intense anger to feedback. So I'm wondering, Kate, if it actually helps you, this business about being able to say what it's like. And I'm wondering what you did. I'd be interested to see what you did as a result of that, Kate. That's Kate J. We've got more than one Kate. So Kate J, how did you react when they did react in anger? What did you find yourself doing? It may be that you were making yourself just work too hard. And I would say that, staying quiet is great. But actually responding with some empathy really, really does work. Kate R. People often look like they take the feedback well and then they react at a later stage. Interesting. It may be, I'm guessing here, Kate R., because they didn't have a chance to react, or maybe they did react very slightly in the room, but perhaps you didn't notice. Perhaps you thought, okay, got that out of the way. So I think it's really important to look very, very carefully at what people are doing, even if it's just a flinch. Look at the mouth and the eyebrows, mouth and eyes. Mouth, for me, is the thing that gives it away. A flinch, a silence, and point out the feeling that you think you're seeing. One more before I stop, and I will come back. There's lots more questions coming in. I have experienced passing. So this is from Amanda Z. I have experienced passing on negative feedback to A from B. Oh, okay, third party. But when A reacted badly and spoke to B directly, B denied it. This affected my relationship with A. Very, very tricky. So this is something about contracting in there. That's my first thought. And passing on feedback for other people is necessarily tricky. It's too late for this time. But when we're working with clients and somebody wants to give somebody else some feedback, so somebody has some feedback for their boss, the first stop for us is always to coach them to give the feedback themselves. 2, if that's not possible, or if they are too worried about doing that, then I get both people in the room and give it there. But I know that's retrospective, and it's very easy to say after the event, Amanda, but tricky. And I guess you probably won't be doing that again. Look, there's plenty of questions left over. I want to make sure that we stay faithful to the quarter past thing. We're just on quarter past, and I'm just going to finish off. So final thoughts. Well, for me, the important thing is here to definitely that the power is in the feeling. It's all about, that's the calibration, that's the reason for them to actually make a change. Secondly, a little and often. That's really important, especially the often. And finally, for me, what's really important afterwards is this business of attentive silence, just staying there whilst they're thinking and watching and being prepared to empathise and to talk it through. You might find that the ensuing conversation is 20 times longer than the feedback, but then you know something's actually happening. Even if they question it, even if they get annoyed, it tells you that you have succeeded in delivering the feedback. It makes for more hard work for you, but at least you know it sank in. I will stick around for however long it takes to answer the rest of your questions. So thank you so much for joining, and I'll see you next time. Okay, so Kate J, I think you said you weren't sure how you reacted to them. So that's one to think about. And it may be that anger you find particularly difficult. Anyway, I know nothing about you, obviously, but it might really help if you don't make yourself work hard. Because when people get angry with us, we feel terrible. We're already off balance. We're already emotionally overloaded ourselves, and actually asking ourselves to do anything brainy is it's untenable and it's not very fair. So keeping your demands low on your brain is a great way of resetting your brain. 1, 2, actually saying how you feel is even better, because then actually that presses the giant reset button. That's emotional first aid, and we will feel a lot better when we say, look, you're really starting to intimidate me with your shouting. I can't do this. Can be a wonderful way of resetting us and actually holding them to account for their behaviour. Okay, so I hope that helps a tiny bit. Okay, acted surprise. Oh, you said actually acted surprise. Yeah, so act surprised, say surprised. I'm sorry I didn't read that, Kate. Craig says, I really like the idea of not using too many words and sticking to the point. Hugh says, I didn't quite understand feedback turn off number 2, the guru. So, okay, so the first one is, the first guy is talking all about, or woman, is talking all about their experience. And the guru is giving me lifestyle advice and telling me how I should behave, how I should think, and what I should do next. The problem with the guru is that even if I believe her or him, and even if I decide to do what they suggest, the problem is that I'm not learning to think, and I begin to believe that the guru, and I didn't explain this before, so thanks for calling it out, I begin to think that the guru has got the answers that I haven't got. Gurus attract acolytes, but they also attract uselessness. I am nothing in the face of the guru. Actually, I would much prefer for everybody to be their own guru. And then we can send the gurus on a long holiday. Hopefully that helps. Okay, so Jenna K, it can be tricky when you're trying to address softer behavioural issues. How would you advise handling total denial or refusal of your feedback? That's a really good one, Jenna. Okay, so here's how it would be. So you've just denied my feedback. You'd say, well, I don't recognise that. I don't think I said that at all. Or I don't think I'm nasty. And I would say, Jenna, I'm worried to hear you say that, because it sounds like you can't see it even now. Or Jenna, I don't know what to say. You seem really reluctant to believe what I've said. So it's actually giving feedback on the reaction to the feedback. That's what I would suggest, Jenna. It's very powerful. It brings it right back into the room. Just sifting through. Okay. Meanwhile, a question. Name the feeling versus anger is a turn-off. What if the feeling you have is one of anger? Is I feel angry that you did X really Is it really such a no-no to say that you're angry? No, that's a really good one, Sue. It's not a no-no, provided you got over the anger to some degree. So Sue, you may do anger in a way which is more controlled than me. But when I'm angry, I know that I can construct sentences, but I spit the words out. My face really changes, and you'll get something pretty nasty. So I know from personal experience that I have to postpone the feedback, even if it's just a few minutes, until the red mist has lifted again. Victoria P. What if you have someone who, for personal reasons, finds any feedback really hard to hear, as their standards for themselves are so high that any constructive feedback is seen as a failure on their part? That's a really good one. Okay, so I would tell a bit of the truth. I would be assertive to begin with, Victoria, and I could imagine saying something like, I'm worried that you hold yourself to account on absolutely everything, Dave. Jane. I've got some feedback for you, Jane, but I'm worried that you're going to tear yourself up about it because you have such high standards. And calling that out actually will bring that to her mind, or his mind, let's be fair, before they have that reaction to you, Victoria. So I think it's worth bringing that insight into the room so that the person can prepare themselves. So it's almost like you're forging a contract between you and the perfectionist to say, I know you're a perfectionist and I'm going to be watching you. So this time, try not to beat yourself up. Is that a deal? And go from there. Sifting through for the last of the questions, Lucy P. How do you suggest giving feedback if it is not possible to do so in person? Okay, that's a really cracking question. It's a question of the age, because so often we're just not even face to face with our direct reports, and they might be on the other side of the other side of the planet, except for twice a year. Okay, number one, phone. If you absolutely have to, it's on the phone. Skype, even better. Skype, VC, FaceTime, anything like that. And yeah, that's it. And just do exactly the same thing. I learned a lot earlier on this year from a company where we did a little bit of work with, who make microphones. In fact, they're Shure microphones, and absolutely fantastic. Probably in quite a lot of the equipment that you have around you. And he was the MD of Shure was very interesting. He brought up some interesting issues about sound quality. And sometimes meaning gets twisted in sound. So the only caveat about giving feedback where there is a microphone between you and them is just be really, really simple. Don't depend on intonation or anything subtle. Put it into the words. There we go. I think that's, again, a delight having you all here this morning, and really look forward to seeing you. If you want to stay in touch, if you want to ask me something, get in touch about something that's on your mind, please go ahead. Otherwise, we'll be back together again on Friday the 25th of August for Fixing the Broken Conversation. Bye for now.